So there was this recent fire at Gul Plaza in Karachi, and it sent smoke signals all across the city. But here's the thing. According to writer Ghazi Saluddin, to really understand what those signals mean, we have to look way beyond this one tragedy. See, this isn't just a story about a fire. It's about what a city's response to tragedy says about its very soul.
So the author, Ghazi Saluddin, kicks things off with this really fascinating line. Right away he says, yeah, I'm writing because of the Gul Plaza fire, but that's not actually the fire I want to talk about. I mean, talk about an intriguing hook, right? It sets up a much bigger story. The author's whole point is that to really get what happened in Karachi, you can't just look at the here and now. We actually have to go back, way back, to a different fire in a completely different city.
And that's where we get this tale of two fires. You've got two absolutely devastating tragedies, separated by a whole century and thousands of miles. But it's their legacies that tell you everything you need to know about the cities they scarred. So he literally asks this question to pivot the whole story. So, where are we going? Well, let's find out.
Okay, so we're jumping in a time machine and heading back to New York City, all the way back to 1911. In this event, this is the benchmark the author uses to measure everything else. We're talking about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. It's one of those moments that's just seared into the city's history, absolutely horrific. But here's the key. It's what happened after the fire that really matters for our story today.
146. That's how many people died. Just a devastating number. And the way they died was just awful. Doors were locked, trapping them inside. Many of them, they actually jumped from the 8th floor to escape the flames.
And you have to remember, behind that number, 146, were real people. We're talking mostly young immigrant women and girls, trying to make a life for themselves in a new country. And that detail is so important because it shows you exactly who was most vulnerable.
The response from the city, it was immediate. It was overwhelming. This wasn't just another headline in the newspaper. This was a deep wound that the entire community felt. A collective sense of shock and grief just took over New York. And the scale of that grief, it's just staggering to think about. Get this, somewhere between 350,000 and 400,000 people marched in the pouring rain for the victims. Can you imagine? It was this massive public display of solidarity.
And this is where you see the real long-term impact. That tragedy didn't just fade away. It became a catalyst for change. First, all that solidarity, it created the political will for real, actual change. We're talking more than 30 new labor laws. And then, the fire became part of the city's DNA, It was remembered in films, books, and art, making sure no one would ever forget.
So the author sets this up as the benchmark, this powerful historical example. Now, with that story of New York's response fresh in our minds, let's come back to the present day and see what the legacy of tragedy looks like in Karachi. So the author isn't just looking at the recent Gul Plaza fire. He's also pointing to an even deadlier one from 2012, the Baldia factory fire. And these are the two events he puts right up against what happened in New York. Okay, so in that 2012 Baldia fire, more than 250 workers were burned to death. That's way more people than in New York. And the worst part? It was later revealed that the fire was actually arson. And right here, this is the core of the author's entire argument, laid out for us. Think about it. In New York, you got solidarity, you got reform, you got this enduring memory. But in Karachi, after an even deadlier fire, the author says it was quickly forgotten. It was just back to business as usual. And the whole thing got swallowed up by divisive politics. This quote from the article just nails that contrast perfectly. Even with this massive, horrific human cost, the author argues that the city's conscience just didn't wake up. There was no collective demand for real change. So what gives? Why the huge difference? Well, the author suggests that these fires aren't just random accidents. No, they're symptoms of a city that he says is, quote, teetering at a breaking point. He talks about this foundation that's basically crumbling under the weight of all these systemic failures. You've got poor infrastructure, blatant violations of safety laws, corruption everywhere, and public institutions that are just falling apart. When you put all that together, you create an environment where a disaster isn't just possible, it's pretty much inevitable. And instead of this being a moment for everyone to come together and demand reform, like what happened after the Triangle fire, the author points out that the Gul Plaza tragedy is actually being used to create more division, to stir up partisan anger for political gain. And all of this brings us to the author's conclusion. But it's not really an answer. It's more like a series of really tough, challenging questions that he puts to the people of the city themselves.
See, he shifts the focus away from just blaming the government and turns the spotlight onto the public. He's basically asking, where are the citizens who care? Where is that sense of belonging, that sense of collective responsibility for the city and for each other?
And that leads to the final, and I mean really piercing, question he leaves us with. It's such a provocative challenge, right? It forces you to ask, what is a community really? And what does it take for a tragedy to actually transform a city for the better, instead of just being forgotten all over again?